It's funny how life throws curveballs at you when you least expect it. After years of radio silence, an invitation landed in my mailbox, addressed to Ethan Grayson. That's me. The sender. My younger sister, Lily, the golden child, the pride and joy of our dad and stepmom, Denise, the last person I thought I'd hear from. 7 years. That's how long it had been since I cut ties with them. No calls, no texts, not even a casual, "Hey, hope you're doing well." But now, here I was holding this ornate wedding invite, complete with a handwritten note from Lily herself. Her handwriting was unmistakable, curvy and neat, just like I remembered. "I miss you," it read. "I want us to fix things." I stared at those words for what felt like forever, trying to figure out if this was some elaborate joke. Was she serious? After everything that happened, after the way they treated me, she wanted me back? Memories from the past surged forward, uninvited but insistent. Our mom had passed away when I was 15, leaving me and 12-year-old Lily to navigate a sea of grief. But while I was still drowning, Dad had found a lifeboat in Denise. Within a year, he'd remarried, and Denise moved in. She was efficient, I'll give her that. Efficient at erasing every trace of my mom. Family photos disappeared. Mom's favorite decor vanished. The house became a shrine to Denise's taste, and Lily, ever the optimist, clung to her like she was a lifeline. Me? I couldn't stand her. I didn't trust her either. Denise had a knack for control, and as Lily grew older, she became the perfect little protégé. By the time I left for college, the division in our family was undeniable. Dad refused to help me financially, insisting I man up and take responsibility. Meanwhile, Lily got everything: tuition, a new apartment, even a car. I juggled part-time jobs, trying to scrape by while building an event planning business from scratch. Eventually, I had enough. No dramatic fights or shouting matches. I just stopped. Stopped calling, visiting, and caring about people who clearly didn't care about me. And honestly, I thrived without them. My business grew beyond what I'd ever imagined, and I built a life that didn't need them. So why did I feel so conflicted staring at that invite? Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the note. Or maybe deep down, I hoped Lily meant what she said. I wrestled with the idea for days. Part of me wanted to toss the invite in the trash and move on. Why should I care? They hadn't cared when I was struggling to get through college or scraping together enough for groceries, but the note from Lily stopped me. What if she was sincere? What if this was her way of extending an olive branch, of trying to fix something that had been broken for so long? I decided to go. Not to reconnect with Dad or Denise. I knew better than that. But for Lily. Still, I wasn't about to show up empty-handed. Despite everything, I wanted to do something nice for her. I offered my services as a wedding planner, full package, no strings attached. My business had grown enough that I could afford to do it as a gesture, and honestly, I thought it might be a way to reconnect. But Lily declined, politely but firmly. "Thanks, Ethan, but Denise has already handled everything," she said. It stung more than I expected. I couldn't tell if it was Denise's influence or if Lily genuinely preferred her stepmother's taste. Either way, I let it go. I'd tried. The ball was in her court. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. Memories of the past clawed their way to the surface. Holidays where I was the odd one out, Denise's cutting remarks about my hobby business, and Dad's dismissive attitude whenever I tried to speak up. It was a montage of every moment that had pushed me away in the first place. But I told myself this wasn't about them. It was about Lily. If it went south, I could leave. Simple. I had nothing to prove. The venue was breathtaking. High ceilings, chandeliers that sparkled like they were dripping diamonds, and flowers arranged with the precision of an art installation. No expense had been spared. It was the kind of place that screamed, "Look at us. We have money." I got there early, because that's just who I am. Always the planner, always prepared. But as I walked through the grand hall, unease settled over me like a heavy coat. This was the first time I'd seen my family in 7 years. Would they welcome me? Ignore me? Tear me apart? When I saw Lily, she looked stunning, happy, radiant, and every bit the bride she deserved to be. She spotted me too, and to my surprise, gave me a hug. "Thank you for coming, Ethan," she said, her voice warm and sincere. For a moment I thought, okay, maybe this won't be so bad. And then I saw Denise. She was standing off to the side, watching us with a smile that didn't even pretend to be genuine. Her voice was saccharine as she said, "Ethan, welcome. Still running that little party business of yours?" I clenched my jaw and forced a smile. "It's going well, thanks." She smirked, clearly unimpressed, and turned her attention elsewhere. Classic Denise. I reminded myself I wasn't here for her. The ceremony was beautiful. Lily looked genuinely happy, and for a while, I let myself forget about the tension. But I knew it wouldn't last. The seating chart was my first clue. Table 18. If you've ever been to a wedding, you know the drill. The prime tables are for family, then close friends, then distant relatives. By the time you hit double digits, you're in random stranger territory. My table mates were Aunt Joyce, who smelled like mothballs, and Uncle Harold, who spent every holiday droning on about his coin collection. The other two people at the table? I didn't even recognize them. Meanwhile, Denise's family and Lily's close friends were cozied up near the dance floor. Dad and Denise? Front and center, of course, basking in their VIP status. I couldn't help but laugh under my breath. 7 years of no contact, and they still managed to remind me I was an afterthought. Fine. I didn't come here for the seating arrangement. I came for Lily. I poured myself a glass of water and tried to stay calm, but the first bomb of the evening landed shortly after. I was halfway through pretending to listen to Uncle Harold's rant about rare coins when I saw him, Dad, weaving his way toward my table, drink in hand. The slight sway in his step and the flush in his face told me everything I needed to know. He was drunk. My stomach tightened. This wasn't going to be pleasant. He slammed his hand on the table, making Aunt Joyce jump. "What the hell are you doing here, Ethan?" he slurred. I froze, stunned. "I got an invitation," I said calmly, even pulling it out of my pocket like a student presenting a hall pass. "Lily invited me." He snorted, loud enough to draw stares from nearby tables. "You should have stayed where you belong. You're just here to embarrass us, aren't you? Show up with your little party business like it means something." I felt my face heat up, a mix of anger and humiliation swirling inside me. Before I could respond, Denise appeared at his side, perfectly timed as always. "Ethan," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Do you even make enough to buy that suit, or is it rented?" She smirked, triumphant, as if she'd delivered a knockout punch. I looked at her, then at Dad, and realized there was no point. You can't reason with people like them, especially when they're drunk on both alcohol and their own sense of superiority. So I stood up, smoothed my suit, and said, "Excuse me." Without waiting for a response, I walked away. Outside on the patio, the cool night air hit me like a lifeline. I leaned against the railing, staring at the garden below and trying to calm the storm inside me. But the words wouldn't stop echoing in my head. Embarrassment. Little party business. I'd built that business from nothing, pouring years of hard work and sacrifice into it. And here they were, treating it like a hobby I picked up on a whim. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I didn't owe these people anything. Not my time, not my energy, not my silence. The sound of upbeat music floated through the air from inside. It felt surreal, like two completely different worlds existing side by side. In there, people were laughing, celebrating, dancing. Out here, I was reevaluating everything. I was about to head to my car and call it a night when something caught my eye. Through the glass doors, I noticed the event staff moving with practiced efficiency, clearing plates, adjusting decor, setting up the next course. And then it hit me. They weren't just any staff. They were my staff. The realization made my head spin. A few months ago, my company had acquired a smaller event planning business. This wedding? It was one of their gigs. No wonder the setup looked so polished. The flowers, the lighting, the perfectly timed dinner service. It was all being executed by my team. I couldn't decide whether to laugh or scream. Had Lily and Denise hired my company without realizing it? Or did they know and just not care? Either way, the irony was staggering. Suddenly, the power dynamics of the night shifted. All this, the chandeliers, the floral arrangements, the seamless execution, was happening because of me. And yet, they still treated me like I was nothing. I pulled out my phone and dialed my operations manager. "Hey, Kate," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Quick question. This wedding, are we running it?" There was a pause. "Yeah, why?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Just wanted to confirm," I said, and hung up. I stared at the scene unfolding inside, my mind racing. Every detail of this wedding was a product of my work, my team's talent, and yet, Dad and Denise thought they could humiliate me while basking in the fruits of my labor. Not a chance. Standing there on the patio, watching the reception unfold, I realized I had a decision to make. I could let them keep walking all over me, or I could finally stand up for myself. I dialed Kate again. My hand wasn't shaking from nerves. It was pure adrenaline. "Hey, Kate," I said. "Can you check the contract for this event? Does it have our usual termination clause?" She didn't hesitate. "Yep. Hostile or discriminatory behavior toward staff or management gives us the right to terminate services immediately." "Perfect," I said, a smile creeping onto my face. "We're invoking it. Start packing up." There was a pause. "Wait, what happened? Is everything okay?" "Let's just say the client made it very clear they don't want us here," I replied. "I'll explain later. Just trust me on this." Kate didn't push. "Got it. I'll handle it." I hung up and took another deep breath. This wasn't about revenge, not entirely. This was about respect, or rather the complete lack of it. They wanted to belittle me, humiliate me, act like I was a failure. Fine. But they weren't going to do it while enjoying the results of my hard work. Inside, the reception was in full swing. Guests were mingling, the music was lively, and servers were delivering the first course with military precision. On the surface, everything looked perfect. My team started their work quietly. The lighting crew began dismantling the uplights around the room, moving discreetly to avoid drawing attention. The floral arrangements disappeared next, followed by the table linens and decorations. At first, no one noticed. That's how good my staff is. They move like a well-oiled machine. But as the room began to look less and less polished, whispers started. Guests glanced around, puzzled. Denise was the last to notice, of course. She was too busy holding court at her table, laughing with her friends and basking in the glow of the night. Dad was nowhere to be seen, probably off nursing another drink. But when a server whispered something to Denise, her expression shifted from smug to furious in an instant. She shot up from her chair and marched across the room, her heels clicking like gunshots against the marble floor. "What's going on?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Why are they taking everything down?" The server looked genuinely terrified. "I don't know, ma'am. You'll have to ask the event manager." That's when she spotted Kate, who was calmly directing the staff. Denise stormed over, her tone escalating with every step. "What is this? What the hell are you doing?" Kate didn't flinch. "We're following the terms of the contract, ma'am. Services are being terminated due to hostile behavior toward our management." Denise blinked, stunned. "What hostile behavior? Who even is your management?" Kate didn't miss a beat. She gestured toward the patio. Denise turned, her eyes narrowing as she spotted me standing outside. Her expression was a mix of rage and disbelief. I gave her a small wave, my face as neutral as I could manage. Moments later, Denise burst onto the patio, her face red with anger. "You!" she hissed. "You can't do this. This is Lily's wedding." "And this," I said, my voice calm, "is my company. You made it clear earlier that you don't respect me or what I do, so why would you want my services?" Her jaw dropped. "You're doing this to punish me, to ruin Lily's wedding." I shook my head. "This isn't about Lily. It's about you and Dad, and the way you've treated me for years. You can't humiliate me and then expect me to bend over backward for you. That's not how this works." She sputtered, trying to come up with a response. But before she could, Kate appeared at my side, clipboard in hand. "Ready to roll out," she said. "Everything's packed." "Thanks, Kate," I replied, ignoring Denise's glare. I turned back to her and handed over my lawyer's card. "If you have questions about the contract, feel free to reach out. Have a great evening." And with that, I walked away, leaving Denise standing there, speechless. The drive home should have been satisfying. I mean, I'd just pulled off one of the most legendary mic drops of my life. But as the taillights of my team's trucks disappeared in my rearview mirror, I couldn't help feeling conflicted. This wasn't how I imagined the night going. Still, I knew I'd made the right call. For the first time in years, I stood up for myself, not just as a business owner but as a person. And while it wasn't the ending I'd hoped for, I wasn't going to let it stop me from moving forward. The fallout, though? That started almost immediately. By the time I got home, my phone was blowing up. Texts, missed calls, voicemails, all from numbers I either didn't recognize or didn't want to deal with. Denise led the charge, of course. Her texts were long, rambling, and dripping with accusations. "I can't believe you did this to Lily." One message started. "You're selfish, vindictive, and childish. You ruined her big day out of pure spite." Each message was more dramatic than the last, peppered with accusations about me, destroying the family's reputation, and even demands that I refund the entire cost of the wedding. Yes, you read that right. Refund. Apparently, she thought she had the moral high ground, even though it was her and Dad's behavior that had triggered the termination. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I muted her number. She wasn't worth my energy. Dad wasn't far behind. His voicemails were a drunken mess of slurred insults and vague threats. I caught phrases like "selfish brat" and "I'll sue your ass." But none of it fazed me. What was he going to sue me for? Enforcing a contract he didn't even know existed? Good luck with that. The one message that did stop me in my tracks was from Lily. "Why would you do this to me?" she wrote. "I thought you came to support me. I didn't think you'd ruin my wedding." That one hit harder than I expected. Her words weren't dripping with venom like Denise's, or full of incoherent rage like Dad's. They were hurt, confused. I sat there staring at the screen for a long time, debating whether to respond. Lily and I hadn't been close in years, but this wasn't her fault. Not entirely, anyway. She'd grown up in the same toxic environment I had, but instead of fighting it, she'd adapted to it. Denise had molded her, and Dad had let it happen. In the end, I decided not to reply. What could I say that she'd actually hear? She didn't understand why I made the decision I did, and honestly, I wasn't sure she ever would. The next morning, the situation escalated. Denise couldn't let it go, of course. She started calling family members, friends, anyone who would listen, and spinning the story to paint herself as the victim. By noon, I'd already received texts from 2 aunts and a cousin, all asking for my side of the story. I sent out a blanket text to the few relatives I still trusted. Long story short, I was insulted, disrespected, and treated like an outsider, so I terminated my company's services per the terms of the contract. If you have questions, ask Denise. If you want the truth, ask the venue staff. I'm done defending myself. To my surprise, one of my aunts replied almost immediately. "Good for you," she wrote. "We've all seen how Denise treats you. I'm just sorry Lily got caught in the middle." Her support caught me off guard. I'd spent so many years assuming the entire family had written me off that I hadn't even considered the possibility that some of them might be on my side. Then came the unexpected fallout from the guests. By that afternoon, I started getting emails and inquiries, business inquiries. Apparently, word had spread among some of the wedding attendees about what had happened, and a few of them were impressed with how my team handled it. One woman, who I vaguely remembered as a friend of Lily's in-laws, reached out to say she admired the professionalism of my staff. "I heard what happened," she wrote. "Your team handled everything with incredible grace. It was clear the issue wasn't with your company, but with the family. I'm hosting a charity gala in a few months and would love to work with you if you're available." Talk about a silver lining. I replied immediately, thanking her for her kind words and setting up a time to discuss the event. By the end of the day, I'd received 3 more similar emails. The same wedding Denise accused me of ruining was now turning into free publicity for my business. Her attempts to humiliate me had backfired spectacularly. By the next morning, Denise had escalated her tantrum to new heights. I discovered she'd left a scathing review about my company online, accusing us of being unprofessional and unreliable. The review was filled with outright lies, claims that we'd arrived late, provided poor service, and abandoned the event without notice. It was the kind of over-the-top nonsense you'd expect from Denise, but I wasn't about to let it slide. I called my lawyer immediately. Within hours, a cease and desist letter was on its way to Denise, warning her that any further false statements would be treated as defamation. The review was taken down the next day. Denise, predictably, didn't stop there. A few days later, I got a call from my lawyer that was equal parts hilarious and infuriating. "Brace yourself for this one," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Denise and your dad are threatening to sue you for breach of contract." I couldn't help but laugh. "Are you serious? On what grounds?" "They're claiming you abandoned the event and caused irreparable damage to Lily's wedding," she explained. "They're demanding a full refund and additional damages for emotional distress." I shook my head, amused by the audacity. Emotional distress? Because I enforced a clause they agreed to? That's rich. "Don't worry," she said. "It's a scare tactic." Their lawyer, if you can even call him that, sent a laughably vague letter with no specifics. I'll draft a response, but they don't have a leg to stand on. The legal back and forth dragged on for about 2 weeks. Denise and Dad kept pushing, likely because their lawyer didn't have the guts to tell them they were wasting their time. Meanwhile, my lawyer compiled a mountain of evidence to shut them down for good. We had everything: the original contract signed by Lily, which clearly outlined the termination clause, witness statements from my staff detailing Denise's hostile behavior, and the pièce de résistance, security footage from the venue. The cameras had captured everything: Dad's drunken tirade, Denise berating my team, and even the moment Kate calmly explained the contract to her. When my lawyer sent their lawyer a final letter laying out the evidence in excruciating detail, the case crumbled almost instantly. "They've dropped the lawsuit," my lawyer said during our final call. "No further action required." The most unexpected fallout came a few days later, when Lily's new husband, Nick, called me out of the blue. "Hey, Ethan," he said awkwardly. "I know Lily wants to talk to you. She feels terrible about everything. She's just, I don't know, scared. She's stuck between you and Denise, and it's tearing her up." I sighed, the exhaustion in my chest outweighing any anger I'd felt. "I get it, Nick. But if she wants to talk, it has to come from her. I'm not going to chase her down." He promised to pass along the message, and I hung up, unsure if I even wanted to hear from Lily. A week later, she texted me, "Hey, can we meet up? I feel like we need to talk." I stared at the message for a long moment, torn. On one hand, it was Lily reaching out, the same Lily who had stayed silent while Denise and Dad tore me down at her wedding. On the other hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more about her smoothing things over for her own sake than a genuine attempt to make amends. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a small cafe I used to frequent back when I was starting my business. It felt strange, sitting there with Lily after everything. "Hey," she said, offering a nervous smile as I sat down. "Hey," I replied, my voice neutral. She wasted no time. "I'm really sorry about what happened at the wedding," she began. "It got so out of hand, and I know Denise and Dad said some things they shouldn't have." I raised an eyebrow. "Some things?" She winced. "Okay, a lot of things. But you have to understand, they were stressed. Weddings are a lot of pressure." I laughed bitterly. "Not personal. Lily, they called me an embarrassment. They mocked my business in front of everyone. How is that not personal?" Her expression shifted, defensive. "Look, I'm not saying what they did was right, but you didn't have to pull out the way you did. You ruined the reception, Ethan. People are still talking about it." There it was, the real reason she wanted to meet. "So this isn't about what they said or did," I said, my tone icy. "This is about how it made you look." "That's not fair," she shot back. "I'm trying to fix this, but you're making it impossible." I shook my head, the clarity hitting me like a freight train. This wasn't about reconciliation. Lily wasn't stuck between Denise and Dad. She was just like them. I stood up, tossing a few bills onto the table to cover my coffee. "I'm done, Lily. With all of it. With Dad, Denise, and now you." I thought maybe things had changed, but all I got was the same disrespect I've dealt with my whole life. "I'm not doing this anymore." "Ethan, wait." "No," I said firmly. "You don't get to rewrite this. I came to your wedding because I thought there was a chance for us to reconnect, but you made it clear where you stand. I'm done." I walked out without looking back. In the months that followed, my life flourished. My business thrived, bolstered by a wave of new clients impressed by how my team handled the wedding fiasco. As for Lily, Dad, and Denise, I cut them out completely. It was the best decision I'd ever made, because family isn't about blood, it's about respect. And none of them had shown me any. And honestly, I don't regret a thing. Story 2. My wife cheated with her ex on our wedding day is the headline of this story. I never know, I think. As I left the altar, she was by herself. Hello everyone. Big news before we get into today's video. I have started a new Reddit account. It's not Minecraft in the background this time. In keeping with the season, there are Subway Surfers and a Christmas motif. Take a look, subscribe, and get involved. The description contains links. I'll see you there. Let's begin the video now. Okay, so let's get started. I'm Ryan, a 30-year-old San Diego resident, and for a very long time, I believed I had everything all out. Life felt pretty darn fantastic, and I was getting married to my 3-year girlfriend Sabrina. She could light up a room when she came in, and she was very attractive and gregarious. "Man, you're lucky," was what everyone who knew her would remark. And I think they're real. Who wouldn't, after all? She appeared ideal on paper. We meticulously arranged this lavish wedding. We had a live band, elegant catering, a beachfront venue, you name it. Although it wasn't inexpensive, I felt it was worthwhile. I take it that you only get married once? That's what I believed at the time, anyhow. However, a week or so prior to the wedding, Sabrina began to behave differently. I dismissed it at first. You know, weddings are stressful because of the seating charts, decor, and guest lists. It's a lot, really. Her actions were more than simply tension, though. Something else was involved. She would abruptly become very covert with her phone, turning it over every time she put it down or leaving the room to answer calls. Sincerely, I didn't want to come out as some worried fiancé, so I didn't say anything at first. I'm not like that. Then, one evening, her phone rang on the nightstand as she was taking a shower. The screen illuminated and a name appeared, but I wasn't attempting to pry. Jason. For a moment I wondered, who the hell is Jason? Then it dawned on me. It's her former partner. Yes, that Jason. She vowed to have moved on from the person long ago. It was not a lengthy message. "Looking forward to tonight," was all it said. That's all. I'll also admit that I felt a bit queasy. Why, after all, was she planning with her ex just a few days prior to our wedding? However, I later reminded myself not to make snap judgments. It may have been innocent. Perhaps she was assisting him in some way. Helping others has always been Sabrina's style. Later that evening, after she had just gotten out of the shower and we were getting ready for bed, I made the decision to simply ask her. "Hey, so Jason texted you earlier," I said. "What's that about?" Not even blinking. "Oh, Jason. Yes, he is simply going through a difficult time. I have been keeping an eye on him. It isn't significant." She spoke as if it were the most commonplace thing in the world. Perhaps it was, but I wasn't comfortable with the way she stated it. But I didn't push. After then, things began to mount up, but I decided to ignore it for the time being. She would inform me that she would meet with her maid of honor to discuss the specifics of the wedding, but she would not elaborate. If I asked too many questions, she would become very defensive and claim that I was making things more difficult for her or stressing her out. Admittedly, I began to question whether I was overanalyzing the situation. Was I acting like that person who makes a huge deal out of nothing? That was not a man I wanted to be. I was still bothered by the phone issue. Jason wasn't the only one. Every time she received a large number of texts, she would quickly conceal her phone or pretend not to hear them. I even made a joke once. Something like, "You have a hidden admirer." She dismissed it with a simple laugh. However, she avoided making eye contact. Yes, I did remember that. The night that truly turned things up a notch then arrived. I was informed by Sabrina that she would be meeting her maid of honor, Grace, to finish some wedding-related matters at a cafe. I didn't give it much thought because it seemed very usual. I stayed at home, watched TV, and was about to pass out when Eric, my best man, called. "Are you busy, Ryan?" With a rather hesitant tone, he asked. "No. What is going on?" I answered, rather perplexed. He hesitated a moment. "Look, guy, I'm at Charmin Bar right now, and I just spotted Sabrina here. I'm not sure whether I should say anything." "All right," I said, not fully comprehending the issue. "Grace isn't with her." Slowly, Eric said, "I'm very certain that the person she's with is Jason." I was interested in that. Jason likes her ex. Jason. Yes, dude. In the corner, they are seated in a booth. They don't seem to be discussing centerpieces, if you get what I mean. I was momentarily at a loss for words. When Sabrina informed me she was meeting her buddy, she was at a pub with her ex. What on earth was happening? "I'm sorry, Guy," Eric said, perhaps sensing my silence. "I believed you ought to be aware. If you would like, I can email you a photo." I told him to mail it, and I was devastated when it arrived. She was sitting far too close to Jason, smiling as if nothing were wrong, and resting her hand on his arm. I hung up after thanking Eric. Following Eric's call, I couldn't stop thinking about the picture. Jason and Sabrina are seated in that booth. Too near, too cozy. It wasn't merely a reunion with an old acquaintance. We both realized it looked intimate. I spent the better part of the night trying to think of something to do. I knew it wasn't the perfect time to rush down to the bar, but I still wanted to do it. I had to keep my emotions in check and view this for what it was. The next day, Sabrina pretended like nothing had occurred. She seemed happy, singing a song as she brewed coffee in the kitchen, as if she hadn't spent the previous evening cuddling with her ex. "Good morning, sweetie." With the same radiant grin that used to captivate my heart, she remarked. I started to doubt everything I had agreed to. "Good morning. How did your encounter with Grace go?" She made no hesitation at all. "Oh, that was wonderful. We reviewed a few last-minute seating chart items. To be honest, she is a lifesaver." As if it were any other day, she took a drink of her coffee and began to browse through her phone. Then it struck me. She was a really skilled liar. She exuded confidence and naturalness in both her speech and movement. I would have purchased every phrase that annoyed me more than anything else if Eric hadn't phoned. At the time, I didn't press her. I was curious to see out how far she would go with the deception. So I inquired, "Did you all spend the entire time in the cafe? You appeared to have been out rather late." "Oh yes," she responded nonchalantly. "After spending some time there, I dropped her off at her house. It was only a long evening." I nodded and bit my tongue to avoid saying anything I would later regret. It was a long night. I gave Eric a call later that day to acquire further information. "Did you observe anything else? Did they go together?" I asked, attempting to remain composed. "No, dude. When I left, they were still there," Eric added. "However, they appeared very at ease. For example, you would assume they were together if you didn't know she was engaged." It hurt. My mind was racing, but I thanked him and hung up. I didn't want to jump the gun, but I also couldn't ignore this. Sabrina informed me she was going out again that night. Another errand with Grace for the wedding. I wasn't going to let it go this time. "Cool." I tried to seem casual as I spoke. "Where will you all be meeting?" She hurriedly grabbed her handbag and added, "Just at her place." I was taken aback by the way she responded. "Okay. For me, say hello to her." After giving me a short kiss on the cheek, she left the room. As quickly as she left, after grabbing my keys, I dialed Eric. I told him I was heading to Seashore. "Are you sure, dude? What if this time she's not even present?" I said. "I must know." Trying not to lose my temper, I parked a block from the pub and went inside. It was packed, the typical mix of natives and college students. She was back in the same corner booth as Jason. but it took me a minute to find her. This time, they appeared even more at ease. He had said something that made her giggle, and she was leaning in his direction. She put her hand on his. I felt sick to my stomach. This was hardly an innocent exchange of words. I refrained from confronting her immediately. They were isolated from the outside world, totally unaware of their surroundings. I seemed to be non-existent. She laughed and gave Jason a little shoulder rub as he moved in close and whispered something in her ear. I tried to control myself by clenching my hand beneath the counter. Before I could stand it any longer, I stayed for perhaps 20 minutes. Without a word, I walked away. I sat in my car after driving home. For what seemed like hours, I had no idea what in the world I was meant to do. In a few days, we were being married. How can you even start with such a situation? I had cooled myself enough to act cool by the time Sabrina got home. "Hey, Grace says hi, by the way," she remarked as she entered, beaming. I hardly looked up from my phone as I nodded. "Well, that's cool. Have you all sorted everything out?" "Yes." As she kicked off her shoes, she spoke. "We only need to settle a few things before we can proceed." It was astounding to me how effortlessly she lied. She didn't even pause. I hardly slept again that night. In an attempt to make sense of what I had witnessed at the pub, I kept playing it back. How could she possibly have cheated on me? I made the decision the next morning that I could no longer keep this to myself. I told Eric everything over the phone. "You need to speak with her, dude. You can't just ignore this," he said. "What will happen if you are married if she continues to act in this manner?" He was correct. However, I wasn't yet prepared to face her. I required additional details and evidence. I so made the decision to watch and see what she would do. Sabrina continued the behavior throughout the course of the following several days. As if nothing were wrong, she would laugh, grin, and discuss the wedding. But I became angry every time her phone chimed. I was aware that she wasn't telling the truth to me, and that Jason was still involved. When the rehearsal dinner finally arrived, I was struggling to keep my composure. Everyone in Sabrina's family was beaming, expressing their excitement for the big day. However, my family was aware that something was wrong. At one point, my mother asked me, "Are you okay?" and drew me away. "You appear preoccupied." "I'm all right. I was not okay, but I lied." I knew I couldn't allow this to continue, and I was enraged. Okay, so I had had enough of sitting around and having Sabrina play me by now. I was sick of her pretending everything was well when I knew it wasn't. Of her lies, of her phony smiles. I'm not a fool, after all. It was time for her to realize that I wasn't someone she could continue to manipulate, even if I could see precisely what was going on. I woke up the morning after the rehearsal dinner with the notion that I would finally say something. I was unable to contain this any longer. When I woke up, I saw her still in bed, carelessly looking through her phone. For a time, I looked at her, wondering whether she felt bad about skulking around with her ex. Did she believe I wouldn't know? Or did she simply assume that I would always forgive her? In any case, she was going to discover that she was completely mistaken. "Hey," my voice said, "steady, we must speak." She glanced up, a little bewildered but not scared. "Yes? What is going on?" I took a seat across from her and fixed my gaze on her. "The other night, where were you? Don't tell me that you were with Grace either, since we are both aware that's untrue." She faked a grin when her face froze for a moment. "What are you saying?" "I told you that Grace and I were working on wedding-related tasks." I rested my elbows on my knees and leaned forward. "Sabrina, stop being so rude. Jason and you were spotted by Eric." I could see the worry beginning to seep into her face as her jaw dropped a little. "Hold on, what? That isn't accurate." She stumbled. "It must have been Eric's fault." "Don't lie to me," I firmly stated. "He was right. I even got a picture from him. Jason and you were both laughing while seated in a booth." Putting a hand on his arm. "Tell me then, what the devil is happening?" For a minute, she sat in utter silence, as though she was trying to think of an explanation. With a last sigh, she murmured, "Okay, fine. It's not what you think, but I did see Jason. Not what I believe." I raised an eyebrow and repeated, "Instead of focusing on your wedding arrangements, you've been skulking about with your ex, lying to me about where you've been, and hanging out at a bar with him." "Now, Sabrina, tell me what it is." She began to cry, which I knew was her usual reaction. Every time she was caught in the act of doing something improper. She shook her voice and continued. "Ryan, it's not like that. Jason contacted me some time ago. He just wanted someone to talk to because he's been going through a lot. I knew you would overreact, so I didn't want to tell you." "Overreact," I said, raising my voice. "Days before our wedding, you're lying to me about hooking up with your ex. Do you also believe that I'm exaggerating?" She stretched out to take my hand as her tears began to fall. "Ryan, you must trust me, please. I cherish you. I'm not attracted to Jason. I was only attempting to assist him." I shook my head and withdrew my hand. "Sabrina, you don't tell lies to people you care about. Additionally, you definitely don't go about secretly with your ex. Right now, can you even hear yourself?" When she saw I wasn't believing her nonsense, she began to panic. "Please, Ryan. I mean, that was an error. I should have avoided seeing him. However, it had little significance. I promise." I got up because I could no longer stand there and listen to her attempt to spin this. "Sabrina, you don't just happen to run into someone more than once. This was no error. This was a decision. Furthermore, it's quite obvious what your priorities are." She leaped to her feet and attempted to keep me from leaving the room. "Hold on. Don't leave, please. This is something we can resolve. I will no longer speak to him. His number will be blocked. Please don't abandon us." I stopped and looked at her for a while. There was a part of me that wanted to believe her, that perhaps this was simply a foolish error she had done in a time of weakness. The other side of me, however, which had spent weeks witnessing her tell lies directly to my face, knew better. "For what duration has this been occurring?" My voice was softer now as I asked. Her hesitation gave me all the information I required. She eventually revealed it after a few weeks, but it wasn't a significant one. "I swear we just spoke." I laughed resentfully. "Are you even able to hear yourself? You're sneaking about with a guy you used to date and you're meant to marry me? Do you really think I'm supposed to ignore this?" That wasn't the case. She was adamant. Now her voice was urgent. "All right, I made a mistake, but I want to be with you. Don't let this destroy anything, please." I walked by her and made my way to the door after shaking my head. "You've already wrecked everything, Sabrina. Now I have no idea who you are." I got into my car and went out, slamming the door. I needed to go and get some fresh air, but I had no idea where I was heading. When I eventually stopped, I informed Eric about the situation over the phone. "She acknowledged it, dude." My voice trembled with rage as I spoke. "She has spent weeks with Jason. I'm really sorry, Ryan, dude." "Yes," Eric answered. "How will you respond?" I inhaled deeply in an attempt to relax. "I'm not sure yet, but I can't ignore this. I'm not going to marry her right now." After being silent for a while, Eric stated, "Look, whatever you decide, know that I've got your back. Man, you don't deserve this." It meant a lot to hear that, but it didn't help the issue. I was aware that I would have to make some difficult choices and that the consequences would be severe. However, one thing was evident. I wasn't going to be embarrassed by Jason or Sabrina. I drove about aimlessly for the remainder of that day, trying to take it all in. Sabrina wasn't only deceiving me. Behind my back, she was leading a whole different life. What's the worst? She dared to continue to act as though nothing was wrong, as if we were still the ideal pair that everyone believed us to be. She wasn't at the apartment when I eventually returned. Excellent. With the wedding just 2 days away, I realized I had to decide. Should I proceed and hope that this was really a careless error? Or should I cancel and face the consequences? The problem is that canceling a wedding involves more than just you and the other person. It concerns the families, the visitors, and the money you have already spent. It had the feel of an impending landslide. Even more than I detested the prospect of failing everyone, I detested the idea of being married to someone who didn't value me. As usual, Sabrina arrived home late that evening. She entered when I was seated on the couch, gazing at the blank TV screen. She seems taken aback by my presence. "Hey," she forced a grin. "You're up late." "Yes," I said without glancing at her. Unable to fall asleep. Presumably aware of the tension in the room, she hesitated. "Pay attention." Earlier, perhaps. I interrupted her before she could finish. Keep it, Sabrina. Right now, I don't want to hear it. I spoke in a stern yet calm tone. I didn't want to listen to her make excuses again. After standing for a while, she sighed and went into the bedroom. I remained on the couch, gazing into the night, attempting to understand how the person I believed I would spend the rest of my life fared, end up being such a liar. Jason wasn't the only one anymore. Trust was at issue. What's left after that's gone. Sabrina pretended nothing had occurred the following morning. She was already dressed and prepared to take on another day of wedding-related tasks when she emerged from the bedroom. After pouring herself a cup of coffee, she began browsing through her phone, ignoring the elephant in the room completely. "What is the schedule for today, then?" I tried to sound informal as I inquired. I hoped she would at least try to be honest with me. Startled, she raised her head. "Oh, just a few last-minute matters with Grace. Quickly," she said. "In addition to making sure the space is configured the way we like, we will pick up the centerpieces." I played along and nodded. "It sounds significant. Do you need assistance?" She gave a tense laugh. No, it's covered by us. You just unwind and prepare for the momentous day." After giving me a short kiss on the cheek, she picked up her luggage and left. I was relieved and angry at the same time when she left. I felt both relieved that I wouldn't have to deal with her for a few hours, and anger that she was still lying to my face. I got a call from Eric. "What are you going to do, man?" I stopped and gazed out the window. I'm not going to let her get away with this, but I'm not sure yet. She believes that I would still marry her even if she walks all over me. "She will be rudely awakened," Eric chuckled. "That sounds like the Ryan I'm familiar with. Tell me if you require backup, please." I pondered how to deal with this for the remainder of the day after we hung up. In order to expose her falsehoods and give her the humiliation she so well deserved, I decided to confront her in front of the wedding guests. It was more than simply her. It was about my taking charge of my life and not settling for anything less than what I was worthy of. That evening, Sabrina was beaming when she got home. "It's all coming together just right." I dropped my bag on the counter. She added, "I believe that this will be the most memorable day of our life." I tried to mask my annoyance by forcing a grin. "That's fantastic," I said. "I'm happy that everything is going well." She came over and put her head on my chest and put her arms around me. "Ryan, you are loved. I just wanted to let you know how much I appreciate you, even though I know things have been hectic recently." She seemed to be trying to persuade herself just as much as she was attempting to persuade me, and her remarks sounded empty. I remained silent. I remained still until she released her hold and went to shower. I became aware of something while I sat there. I no longer loved her, or perhaps I did, but not as much as I once did. Now that the confidence had been lost, what remained? A lovely face and many unfulfilled promises. For me, that was insufficient. While I sat on the couch contemplating how I would face the next day, Sabrina was in the bedroom the night before the wedding, most likely dreaming about walking down the aisle. I was aware that I couldn't wed her, but I also knew that I had to make my choice obvious in a way that she couldn't ignore. In the morning, I felt oddly at ease. I was no longer anxious or upset. I had just gotten ready. I'm prepared to defend myself, to terminate this charade, and to leave someone who didn't deserve me. As we prepared to go to the location, Sabrina was giddy with anticipation. "Is it not unbelievable?" She smiled and said, "We're going to be husband and wife in a few hours." I forced a second smile. Yes. It's hard to think she was too preoccupied with her own world to notice the edge in my voice. That was okay, though. Soon enough, she had noticed. I cooperated, nodding at her father when he gave me his questions and responding when I had to. Don't ruin this appearance, and greeting visitors by shaking hands when they arrived. I seemed to be operating automatically. I was simply waiting for the right time inside. As soon as I entered the ceremony space, the arrangement was stunning. White seats set neatly in precise rows, flowers everywhere and the ocean as the backdrop. It looked like something straight out of a magazine. It should have been special, but all I could think was how much of this money did I just waste. Guests were slowly pouring in, chatting and joking, unaware to the danger building. My guys were in place, all looking nice in their suits. Eric gave me a nod, silently asking if I was okay. I nodded back. No turning back now. Sabrina's family was all smiles, greeting everyone, talking about how happy they were for the big event. It made me nauseous. Her dad even walked up and clapped me on the shoulder. "You ready to officially join the family, son?" I faked a grin. Of course. The words tasted like ash in my tongue, yet I spoke them. Everyone sat down as soon as the music began. Like they were in a romance film, Sabrina's bridesmaids walked down the aisle. I hardly paid any attention to them. I was preoccupied with what I was about to do. I didn't have a beating heart. I didn't have trembling hands. I maintained my composure. "Are you ready?" Everyone stood as the music changed to the traditional wedding march. With her arm wrapped around her father's, Sabrina emerged at the end of the aisle. I just saw a manipulator and a liar who had no trouble skulking about with her ex while I was at home making plans for our future. Her look seemed to be a mask that concealed the person I had come to know. To last, she arrived to the altar. Her father stood across from me, grinning broadly, and shook my hand firmly before whispering, "Take good care of her." Too preoccupied with what was going to happen, I simply nodded. In his introductory words, the officiant discussed marriage's purity, love, and commitment. I hardly heard anything. I was awaiting my turn. The first inquiry he asked was directed at me. "Do you consider Sabrina to be your legally wedded wife, Ryan?" I inhaled deeply, while maintaining eye contact with Sabrina. She saw the expression on my face and her grin wavered a little. "Loud enough for everyone to hear?" I apologized, "but I'm unable to do this." The audience let out a gasp. A few whispered, and Sabrina's smile vanished completely. "What? What are you doing?" Her voice trembled as she whispered. I moved away from her and looked at the visitors. "I have to tell you all the truth," I said. I spoke steadily. "For weeks now, Sabrina has not been truthful with me. She has been skulking around with Jason, her ex. She lied to all of you, to her friends, and to me." The whispers increased in volume. Her dad's face became beet red, and Sabrina's mother appeared to be on the verge of fainting. My gentleman stood still as the bridesmaids exchanged startled looks. However, Eric appeared pleased, as though he had been anticipating this moment for almost as long as I had. With teary eyes, Sabrina took hold of my arm. "Stop, Ryan. Don't do this, please. You're doing something wrong." Gazing at her as if she were a complete stranger, I withdrew my arm. "No, Sabrina. You committed the error as soon as you chose to visit Jason. Behind my back, every time you lied in front of me, you succeeded. I'm worthy of better." She began to sob uncontrollably now. I wasn't moved, though. With everyone's attention on us, the audience became quiet. They appeared to be bewildered at what they were witnessing. "Please, Ryan." Her voice broke as she pleaded. "I cherish you. I'll make this right. Please don't abandon me." I gave a headshake. "It's not love to slink around with your ex. The person you are meant to spend your life with is not deceived by love. I don't want this if that's what you call love." I retreated as she attempted to take my arm once again. "This is over, Sabrina, so cry all you want. I'm finished." The officiant, who appeared to want to vanish, caught my attention. "I apologize for taking up your time," I remarked as I passed the astonished audience and continued down the aisle. I didn't turn around. I didn't have to. The harm was already done. I was leaving the venue. I experienced an odd feeling of relief. Yes, I was leaving a disaster in my wake. It was a costly mess, but it was worthwhile. I knew I had escaped a gunshot. What would she do if she was prepared to deceive me before we were even married? After returning to my vehicle, I sat for a while, absorbing everything. The volume of calls and texts on my phone was overwhelming. Sabrina's mother, some of her bridesmaids too. However, I choose to disregard them. I had no acquaintances. An explanation. I had expressed myself. I did answer the phone when Eric called initially. He laughed and remarked, "Dude, that was badass. Are you all right?" "Yes," I responded, letting out a smile at last. "I feel better than I have in weeks. Do you want me to come over and get some drinks? I believe you deserve it." "Yes, dude. I will see you shortly." I felt lighter as I drove away from the arena, as if a burden had been removed. Yes, I had just ruined what should have been the most joyous day of my life. However, it was preferable than living a falsehood. I would be able to start again, whereas Sabrina would have to face the repercussions of her behavior, being aware that I made the proper decision. About 20 minutes after I arrived home, Eric arrived with a six-pack. Man. As he entered the room, he spoke. That was crazy. I nodded and sagged down on the couch, thinking, "You really pulled the plug in front of everyone." Had to. She gave me no option. Eric gave me a can after cracking it open. Their faces should have been visible to you. Her father appeared ready to attack the altar and her bridesmaids. As if it were a reality show, they were constantly whispering to one another. I grinned. Excellent. Let them speak. She deserved it. The voicemails were just what I had anticipated. Apologies and justifications alternated in Sabrina's tremulous, anxious voice. "Give me a call back, Ryan. This is something we can resolve. I acknowledge that I made a mistake, but we can resolve it." The communication from her mother was more combative. "Ryan, you have no right to degrade my daughter in that way. This could not have been addressed in secret. You should apologize to her." Without even finishing the texts, I rolled my eyes and erased them. I had no acquaintances. I apologize. Sabrina owed me one, if nothing else, for squandering my time, lying, and believing she could get away with it. The fallout began to spread after a few days. Word spread swiftly, particularly after Eric showed a couple of their common acquaintances the picture he had taken of Sabrina and Jason at the pub. I wasn't angry about it, but I also didn't ask him to. People are entitled to the truth, particularly when Sabrina's mother began fabricating the tale to make me the villain. According to Sabrina's version of events, I lost my temper under the pressure of the wedding and abandoned her at the altar because I was unable to cope. I didn't like it, but I was able to correct the record without saying anything. It was all in the picture of her and Jason. Her justifications crumbled when people realized that. Lauren, one of her bridesmaids, even contacted me. "I'm really sorry, Ryan." "Over the phone," she said. "I was unaware that she was harming you in that way. I would have spoken out if I had known," I said, not really wanting to get into it. "It's fine. Just relieved it's finished." Lauren wasn't finished, though. Sabrina has been acting shady for weeks, to be honest. She would frequently depart during wedding-related activities, but Grace and I would always assume that she was running personal errands. I regret not challenging it now. "Don't," I said. "It's not your fault." I meant it too. I had no intention of wasting time on anyone other than Sabrina. Jason's involvement was brief, to put it mildly. It seems that Sabrina sought to rely on him for comfort following the disastrous wedding. A huge surprise. He had no interest. When they were skulking about behind my back, he had been all charm and grins. However, he abandoned her as soon as things became serious. According to a mutual acquaintance, he stopped returning her calls and banned her on social media. A sophisticated man. Sabrina made another attempt to contact me, this time by text. Her texts were brimming with passion, regrets, charges, and fervent entreaties. One text would say, "Ryan, I'm very sorry. I am aware that I made a mistake. However, I want to make things right because I love you." "You're being so unfair," the next person might say. "Because of you, everyone now believes that I am a monster. I disregarded each and every one. What was the purpose?" She didn't feel bad about what she had done. She regretted being discovered. Significant difference. She unexpectedly came up at my flat a week after the wedding. It didn't surprise me. It seemed like she would do it. She appeared to be a complete mess when I opened the door. Her eyes were swollen, as if she had been sobbing for hours, and her hair was pulled back in an untidy bun. "Please, Ryan." Her voice was hardly audible above a whisper as she spoke. "Can we have a conversation?" I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. "Sabrina, what do you want?" She paused as if unsure of where to begin. I only wanted to apologize. I'm aware that I offended you. I want to make amends, even though I realize I made a mistake." I glared at her for remaining silent. Give her a chance to wriggle. Her voice broke as she said, "I'll do whatever it takes. Jason will be blocked. I'm going to therapy. I will. I'll do anything. Please give me another opportunity." Slowly, I shook my head. You don't understand, do you, Sabrina? This has nothing to do with going to treatment or blocking Jason. It has to do with trust, and you ruined that. There's no turning back now." She remained mute as her sobbing grew more intense. Even while I had a slight sympathy for her, it wasn't enough to make me reconsider. "Return home." "Sabrina," I stated as I returned to the flat. "And don't return," before she finished speaking. I locked the door after shutting it. Sabrina tried to get in touch with me less frequently as the weeks passed. They eventually came to a complete halt. After word spread about what had transpired, people began to avoid her. Even her closest friends began to recognize her true self. In retrospect, I have no regrets. The finest choice I've ever made was to leave Sabrina. She proved herself to me, and I trusted her. If I've learned anything, it's that you should never accept anything less than what you deserve. Life isn't long enough for that. Sabrina, too. She's still unmarried, as far as I know. Her friends no longer had faith in her, and Jason left. She has plenty of time now, I suppose, to reflect on the decisions she made for me. I'm just relieved that I left. The best choice I've ever made. Story 3. My brother must live with me and split my fortune, per my parents' demands. To be honest, I feel that my 25-year-old brother Ted uses me as a walking wallet. I'm 24 years old. As a child, it was evident that Ted and our grandpa Gary did not get along. Ted had his own problems, such as dumping dishes to see how others would react or damaging things for fun, but Gary wasn't exactly the friendliest person. He seemed to take pleasure in the mayhem. My parents never seemed to hold him responsible in spite of this. They simply put it down to lads being boys, if anything, which never pleased me. I wasn't raised to put up with this conduct, and I don't believe that parents are always to fault for the way their children turn up. Ted is one of those kids that just seems wired differently. Ted was 19 and I was 18 when Grandpa Gary died. The house, his car, a good amount of money, and even his animals were all given to me. The majority of his inheritance passed to me, although my parents also received some family items and some money from his life insurance. Our parents don't have siblings, and we don't have any additional family members like cousins. Thus, it wasn't a major surprise. Since Grandpa believed Ted to be a jerk at the time, he had made it plain to everyone that he would not leave anything to Ted. It had always been hard to confess Ted, and I recall hearing my parents support Gary's choice. He was more than simply challenging. Growing up, he was a nightmare for me. To get me angry, he would make fun of my weight, take my belongings, and even smash them. I've begun to see how these situations influenced my protective personality after going to therapy. I've been referred to as harsh or even nasty, but in reality, all I'm doing is attempting to keep myself safe from harm. My parents had the gall to imply that Ted should receive a portion of my estate in spite of everything. Because of his persistent tormenting, we weren't even communicating at the time. They pretended that I was being irrational when I declined. However, why should I give something to someone who has ruined my life? Upon my arrival at Grandpa Gary's home, for me, things began to improve. I got a job I truly like, paid for education, and had my own place, living according to my own terms. I've maintained a strict budget and made prudent investments with the funds, savoring life. Ted made every effort to prevent me from having. Ted then made a triumphant return to my life last year. He was drowning in child support payments for his 2 children after his wife left him. Every visit to my parents' house has been difficult ever then. They constantly urging me to provide him financial support and to let him live with me, claiming that if Grandpa Gary had known Ted had children, he would have wanted it. Simply said, that is untrue. Gary was well aware of Ted's personality. My visits to my parents have become strategic and infrequent. Ted always turns up, even if I attempt to time them when he's not. Most likely because my mother tells him. He's been making an effort to be close to me lately and hanging out whenever he can. When we went to a bar together, he ordered the bartender to put his drinks on my bill right away, so I paid him in cash right away to avoid any confusion. I may have thought about assisting Ted if he had been a good brother. However, he isn't. I have no interest in saving him since he is a leech. Some may view this as selfish, but I put a lot of effort into achieving personal pleasure and tranquility. Ted's attempt to guilt-trip me in front of the family over a meal was the final straw. He attempted to portray himself as the victim of our grandfather's alleged brutality. My parents nodded in agreement and urged me to consider responsibility and family. However, as Ted narrated his story of misery, I noticed the same cunning sparkle in his eyes that I had learned to fear. "You know, I've had a really tough time," Ted began, his voice brimming with a prepared melancholy. "Being a single father is not easy. I simply assumed that you would wish to assist as my sister. Everyone was watching me, waiting for me to give in, like I usually did when we were kids, and the room was quiet. Ted, not this time." With a firm voice, I started. "I know you're going through a difficult moment, but let's not act like you want to resume our sibling bond. You want to know what I have to offer, not in your sister, me." I raised my hand when my parents attempted to interrupt. "I've already decided. If Ted changes, I'm willing to stay in his life. However, I will not support his lifestyle or his errors. He must take responsibility for his actions." Awkward farewells and irritated looks marked the end of the evening. My parents have been trying to change me ever since, but I've resisted. It's difficult to watch them so oblivious to Ted's suffering because of their partiality for him. So here I am, asking for guidance on how to deal with a family that doesn't appear to share my values of responsibility and justice. How can I uphold my boundaries without cutting all connections? Because they are still my family, despite how much it hurts. However, I'm sick of being the only one who appears to recognize Ted's true self, a bully who has never been held accountable for his acts. How can I handle this without becoming less of who I am? Here's the most popular remark prior to the upgrade. One comment: "You might wish to isolate yourself from your parents. Clearly state that you do not wish to see Ted. Leave if your mother texts him and he shows up. Then politely explain why you don't want to see Ted and turn down their next request. You are not responsible for your parents' sentiments, even if they may be extremely resentful and accuse you of being a horrible sister or daughter. Setting limits might be challenging, but you can do this. You're not there if Ted is. You might be able to loosen your grip after a few years, particularly if Ted gets well, but for the time being, his presence is only making you feel uncomfortable and providing him with a chance to take advantage of you. Additionally, that bar tab thing was quite rude." Second comment: "You have a strange family there. The thing that most bothers me is that rather than assisting Ted, your parents are always attempting to blame him and his problems on you. You don't mention that Ted's parents made an effort to assist him change his annoying childhood behavior, work that they put a lot of effort into. In any case, your parents ought to settle Ted's obligations if they wish to see them paid off. You are entirely correct to resist your parents' attempts to coerce you into leaving their home and providing for Ted. Nevertheless, is it strange? In fact, I can't help but feel terrible for Ted. His annoying demeanor and behavior have ruined his entire existence. He is disliked by everyone, not his ex, not his parents, not his sister, not his grandfather, and most likely not his children. The man need to enlist in the military and leave, and Opie answers, "Yes, that isn't really surprising. They no longer want to deal with Ted because he has been ignored for some time." Third comment: "Opie, you're doing a great job with this. Think about telling your parents that you only want to spend time with them and not Ted, and that if Ted is there, you will leave. Ted just so happens to be present each time they attempt to press the matter. You stroll after being informed he wasn't. You either depart or remind them of the terms of contact and that you know Ted. Then you leave, the restaurant, the bowling alley, the house, whatever it is. Return to your pleasant existence. Your parents will have to make a compromise and leave you alone unless they truly don't want to be involved with you. At first, they will push the dang boundaries as if it were unbelievable. But if you're not there, they can't guilt you. Don't edit Opie. He has done a lot of things to me, and the bar tab issue is only one of them. Among other things, he broke into my handbag prior to my move out. He was always stealing from me. He was either 19 or 21. The last time, he took money from me. I don't enjoy being around him because he puts drinks in my tab and tries to make me feel awful about my life. One update. Hello everyone. Here is the update that some of you have been requesting. To start, I received excellent guidance in a private message. After writing out what I wanted to say, I told my parents I would come talk to them. I detailed all of Ted's prior mistreatment of me, including bullying, stealing, and taunting my friends. I informed them that Ted has not changed and that I would no longer be a part of my life. Ted has never requested custody of his children and has no desire to visit them. All he needs is money to cover child support. He treated himself to the money. He possessed it. Simply put, he didn't want to spend money on children he no longer desired. I informed my parents that I had invested the money they had given me and would not be using it for Ted. I intend to never be a cash cow for Ted, and the money will go to a charity after I pass away. That did not sit well with my parents. I was informed that they wanted Ted to leave their home. All he had been doing was making their lives difficult. I sent them to a link that discussed the month-to-month renter laws in our state. This morning, they handed Ted his official leave documents. They will evict them if he doesn't leave within 30 days. To make him feel less guilty, they urged him to remain with me. They believed I may be able to help him become straight. I don't think it would if it hadn't already. I informed them that by failing to remedy this when I was younger, they had made a mistake, that Grandpa Gary gave me the money for a reason and was aware of Ted's character. "Here, Ted, never learn from your mistakes," was not the last thing I wanted to say on Grandpa Gary's grave. I despise Ted too. I dislike being close to him. I made several attempts to spend time with him in the hopes that he would change. Not at all. He is now much more of a jerk since he has the legal authority to do anything he wants without breaking the law. The ability to behave as one pleases as an adult is a dreadful capability for a host to possess, and Ted possesses it in spades. He is both a mental kid and a legal adult. That combo is not good. This is not to imply that there are saints in my family. I discovered a long time ago that my upbringing has caused some of my problems, but I've made a lot of effort to go over this. I could assist Ted if he tried. He's not trying, though, but I did get in touch with his ex and set up a meeting with the kids to meet them. I expressed my desire to remain active in their lives, even if it meant just seeing her sometimes. According to her, Ted accused me of stealing his money and being an aggressive jerk. I explained my position to her and made it clear that she was free to avoid me if she so desired. All I wanted to know was who my family was. Their dad. The rest of the family shouldn't cut them off just because they're in the same hallway. She essentially informed me that she had no desire to interact with my family. My parents asked that she allow them to assist in raising the children and made her feel like a bitch for leaving Ted. She didn't want anything to do with them after Ted's demise, even if they're pleasant. It seems like Ted will have access to the children, which worries her. I donated them $500 to cover legal bills and for the holidays, because Ted could have been a bad partner, informing her that it isn't from Ted. Ted never did. Please don't include it in the amount owing. I also sent a little dress and a onesie to the children. However, kids are too little to truly understand that I gave them gifts. She thanked me and promised to give me some photos via Facebook, which I might be able to see. She's not sure. She probably believes that I will utilize this link to support my brother. I informed her that Ted didn't know I had a Facebook account and that I truly didn't want to communicate with him. It's not a problem because I don't have my parents on Facebook either. I'm hoping to be able to be a part of their lives. Otherwise, I can totally see why she may not want to. I don't despise my parents, though. Despite their problems, they are often rather cool. One of the most obnoxious things they have ever attempted to accomplish must be this. I hope Ted's expulsion will help him, though, because I won't be. That concludes the update. I appreciate you reading. Report 2. Since my last report, things have really gotten out of control. Let's go back to last week, when my brother Ted showed up at my house without warning. And you know what? He wasn't by alone. He was accompanied by a woman. I had never seen this person before. Yes, a toddler is also present. Ted is there when I answer the door, and he appears to have lost his closest friend, with Eliza, this lady, and her child, whom he presents as Timmy. Ted puts up a strong front. Hey, I know we've had a difficult time together, but we're in a terrible situation. All we need is somewhere to stay for a few weeks while we work things out. There is nowhere else for Timmy, Eliza, and myself to go. When he wants anything, he uses that fake earnestness in his voice. What he's peddling doesn't appeal to me, not for a moment. I told them that we should speak, but not at my home. With my arms crossed and a hopeful yet disoriented expression on my face, we stood outside on the porch. "You can't just arrive like this, Ted. And who are Timmy and Eliza? When did you have your second child?" Ted's justification was as tenuous as a house of cards during a gale. Eliza, whom he met a few months ago, is said to be struggling after being expelled by her family. Everything. As we all know, Ted is assuming the role of the hero while he is actually the one drowning. I gave them the straight scoop. "It's not a makeshift hostel. I am unable to assist you." When Eliza eventually spoke out, she said that her family didn't want anything to do with her, thus they truly had nowhere to go. To be honest, I felt sorry for her. I walked inside, got information on a nearby shelter, and gave them some cash so they could survive. Ted was grumbling about how chilly I was and appeared to be about to blow up. Eliza, however, appeared sincere in her gratitude. After they departed, I was left wondering what on earth had occurred and shaking my head. Later that evening, however, the true jaw-dropper arrived. Eliza calls me from an unidentified phone, but now that she's weeping, the narrative comes out. According to Eliza, she is not Ted's girlfriend. Ted came up with this scheme to make me feel sorry for them when they met a few weeks ago. He promised to help her if she cooperated. The child is not his. He persuaded this poor single mother to join his small scam. I was incensed when I heard this. To be honest, though, that was simply so typical of Ted's constant plotting. I assured Eliza that phoning me was the correct thing to do and that she wasn't at fault. I told her to stay away from Ted and make use of the resources I provided for refuge. I pressed the block button without thinking twice, even though Ted's calls have been rolling in since then. His drama no longer has a place in my life. However, this goes beyond simply avoiding drama. It's about not allowing his destructive conduct to continue. I've been struggling with what to do ever since. At the next family gathering, there is a genuine urge to reveal the entire situation. Shouldn't everyone be aware of what Ted attempted to do? A part of me feels that this time, it's essential to demonstrate how far he's come. However, that tiny voice then asks whether it's really worth causing further problems. Will it make a difference, or will it only make an already tense family connection worse? Furthermore, it goes beyond only defending myself or exposing Ted. It concerns the harm that these frequent interruptions are causing to my own mental health. Every time I believe I've established a barrier, another issue arises that puts my commitment to the test. Having to justify my choices to my family all the time is tiring, especially when it comes to Ted. Thus, I find myself in a difficult situation. I want to maintain my distance and the tranquility I've established for myself, on the one hand. However, there is a part of me that feels compelled to make things better, or at least attempt to. Perhaps it's because of their family, or perhaps it's just the old habit of taking the blame for Ted's mess. In any case, it's a lot to handle, and I'm starting to regret my decisions. Should I sever all ties? Is it possible to keep up a contact with my parents without becoming entangled in Ted's chaotic situation again? I'm now attempting to determine how to respond to a scenario that seems to be shifting the goalposts all the time. How do you handle a family member that poses a real risk to your health, rather than simply being an annoyance? And how can you safeguard your mental well-being without cutting off all contact with your loved ones? To be honest, navigating this familial minefield gets more difficult every day, so any guidance or insights would be greatly appreciated. What should I do in this situation? In an increasingly crazy environment, how can I maintain my sanity? I'm still attempting to answer this challenge, so any assistance would be greatly appreciated. The third update. Hello everyone, we appreciate your patience while we provide another update. Since my last post, things have become even worse, and you wouldn't believe it. I assumed I had seen it all, but it seems that Ted's involvement never ends the drama. Here is a summary. My parents called me shortly after the last incident to invite me over for what they said was a crucial family conversation. The light of everything that has been happening. Naturally, I had some doubts, but I reasoned that perhaps they were at last prepared to consider things from my point of view. I was mistaken, boy. It was like entering a surprise party that you wish you hadn't been invited to when I arrived at their place. Ted was there, along with my parents, who were prepared with what appeared to be a prepared list of worries. They had also brought in a few aunts, uncles, and cousins whom I hadn't seen in a long time. There was tension in the room. Until we all sat down, everyone appeared to be avoiding eye contact and tiptoeing around. My mother's statement that they were all worried about me started the conversation, which swiftly descended into a full-fledged criticism of my handling of the Ted problem. They said I wasn't sympathetic enough to poor Ted's plight and was being too harsh. Ted was portrayed by my dad as a lost soul who needed a little more help from his family, particularly his sister. Yes, I am that person. Naturally, Ted was soaking it up, seeming solemn and misunderstood. He was extremely good at playing the victim, hurt not only by life, but also by his spiteful sister, who had it all. They got into me, saying that it seems like everything these days is Grandpa's house and a little piece. I had a mixture of incredulity and rage. How could they have twisted things this way? After everything Ted had done, it was strange to see them support him. I didn't hold back when it was time for me to speak. This has nothing to do with family matters. This has to do with your refusal to accept Ted for who he truly is. He's not only making mistakes because life is difficult, he is deliberately making decisions that cause harm to others. I will not advocate for that. I will not allow him to. A real storm was triggered by that. Suddenly, everyone's voices rose, and Ted jumped in to pretend to be the younger brother who had been wronged, saying things like, "See, she just doesn't care. I am also your son." However, I received nothing, while she received everything. He gave a unique performance. In the midst of all this upheaval, I'll give him that. After remaining silent for the most part, my Aunt Marie abruptly got to her feet. She's always been more of an observer, but it's typically worth listening to what she has to say. With the no-nonsense tone that has made her the unofficial matriarch since Grandma's death, she added, "Enough of this. Our goal is not to band together against anyone. What are we doing here if you don't understand that Ted is somewhat to blame for his own issues?" Her intervention helped to calm things down and got some members of the family talking among themselves, maybe making them reevaluate the biased story they had been told. But that didn't sit well with my parents. They persisted in encouraging me to change my mind and reevaluate what family meant to me. I was both relieved and irritated when I left their home because I was angry with the family I grew up with for being so ready to ignore Ted's manipulations. However, I was happy that I maintained my position and refused to back down in the face of their demand. My phone has been a continual source of anxiety ever since, beeping with calls and texts from relatives. Some say they understand my decision and are supportive. Some people attempt to shame me into altering my views, and they are just as manipulative as Ted. To put it mildly, it has been taxing. I made the decision to seriously step back at this point. I've been interacting with the family only with those that appreciate and understand my stance. Regarding Ted, he has tried to get in touch with me in a number of ways, apologizing one day then accusing me the next. I have stayed away. I've had to reconsider many of my relationships, not just with Ted, but with my entire family, as a result of the entire circumstance. Realizing that the people you grew up with, who are supposed to support you, might just as quickly turn on you if it suits them is difficult. However, it has also helped me to better understand who I can trust and who I need keep at a distance for the time being. I'm concentrating on my personal projects, friends, career, and life. First and foremost, I want to create a life free from family strife. When I consider how things used to be, I realize that it's not always easy, and that some days are more difficult than others. However, I am certain that I am making the best choice for my health. Once again, I appreciate all of your help and guidance. It's been really helpful throughout this crazy time. Even though I don't know what the future holds for my family, I'm taking things one day at a time, and am certain that I'm moving in a healthy path. Just know that I'm persevering, being loyal to who I am, and attempting to find calm in the middle of the craziness. I'll update you all as events unfold. An update following my most recent significant argument with my family. I deliberately chose to distance myself from each of them. Finding out what life was like without the continual burden of family conflict was something I desperately wanted to do. Making that choice wasn't simple. There were moments when I questioned if I was being overly severe, aloof, or frigid. However, I persisted because I had a gut feeling that it was what I should do for my own health. Distancing was most difficult over the first several weeks. I was relieved and yet uneasy at the same time since my phone was weirdly quiet. I had too much time to contemplate and worry because of the stillness. If I had called correctly, I immersed myself into my passions, which I had ignored for too long, at this period. Like taking hiking and painting more seriously again. It was like catching up with old friends when I rediscover these aspects of myself. I had forgotten how happy these things made me feel, how they calmed my spirit and cleansed my mind. Weeks became months. It became apparent that the new normal was simply that, normal. My everyday life was considerably calmer, I was less tense, and I was more aware of what made me happy. I was able to consider all that had transpired in this new mental state, without letting my emotions impair my judgment. Then one day, suddenly, I received a text from my mother. Simply said, "How are you?" It was the first straw since everything had fallen apart, but it wasn't particularly noteworthy. I was hesitant, initially responding in a light-hearted and non-committal manner. But gradually, we increased our texting. I was careful to maintain limits. Surprisingly, she also showed them respect. We didn't get into any heated debates. I was relieved that it was mainly about exchanging brief updates. In contrast, Ted has entirely slipped my mind. According to rumors, he moved in with a friend after being ordered to leave our parents' house. I'm very appreciative that he hasn't contacted me personally. I'm not sure if he has truly begun to accept responsibility for his acts, or if he is simply too busy living his own life to bother me. However, the distance has provided me with much-needed tranquility. My dad and I still have a tense connection. Since the intervention, we haven't communicated much. It seems to me that he is still unhappy with the way things turned out. Perhaps even feels a little deceived by my firm position. Although it aches to know that there is a rift between us, I've learned that not all relationships can be repaired, at least not right away. If healing occurs, it will take time. Most of the family members who have contacted me have been encouraging, or at the very least, they haven't attempted to re-engage me in the drama. An amazing support system has been provided by my Aunt Marie, who defended me at that most recent family get-together. She has taken on the role of a family mediator, making sure that everyone respects one another's limits, which has been really beneficial. In many respects, this entire experience has been eye-opening. I've learned the value of setting and maintaining limits, even in the face of difficulty. Even if it means separating from those you care about, I now have a better understanding of who I am, my boundaries, and what I require from relationships. It's been an unexpected but worthwhile voyage of self-discovery. In retrospect, I can see how much of my energy was being used up trying to maintain harmony and please everyone. It's unhealthy and not sustainable. I've been able to reconstruct my life the way I want it, thanks to this hiatus, concentrating on the things that make me happy and calm. I feel more like myself now than I have in years, just a few months later. There are difficulties in my life, but they seem easier to handle when I'm not burdened by family matters all the time. I'm enjoying the quiet after the storm, taking things one day at a time, and gradually re-establishing the relationships that are important on more stable, healthy ground. I appreciate all of your guidance, your kind words, and your support during this entire process. Knowing that I have this community to lean on has been invaluable during this crazy journey. For now, I'm simply going to enjoy the quiet and continue to think on the good things I've changed in my life, but I'll keep you updated on how things turn out. Cheers to a future that appears to be getting a little better every day and to finding peace in the midst of the chaos. The fifth update. Here is the most recent. Ted ended up behind bars. Though I still find it difficult to comprehend, it did happen. Financial fraud, serious issues with forged signatures, and defrauding gullible people of their money are among the charges. It's like something from a criminal drama. It's real life, though, and my brother is the one at the heart of it. When my mother called, her voice trembling as she described what had happened, the news hit me like a freight train. She told me the specifics through tears, and then, almost as expected, she made the request that really shocked me. After everything that had happened, and the never-ending cycles of deception and chaos, they wanted me to save Ted, They wanted me to intervene and rescue him from the predicament he had found himself in. I begged my mom to allow me some time to think it over, hanging up the phone with a sad heart and a mind racing with mixed feelings. Part of me felt a tug of pity for Ted. Jail is no light matter, and the notion of someone I know being in that type of setting is uncomfortable. But then the larger, more sensible half of me kicked in, reminding me of all the reasons I had detached myself in the first place. Of all the times Ted had chosen his route, uncaring of the repercussions and the people he damaged along the way. Those few hours of reflection were some of the most contemplative I've experienced. I pondered about responsibility, what it meant to genuinely be accountable not just for ourselves, but for the conduct we condone in others. Could I, with good conscience, spend my hard-earned money to bail out someone who has continually demonstrated such contempt for others? Was I bound to aid merely because we shared the same blood? The solution came to me clearer than I expected. I told my mother I couldn't do it over the phone. I clarified that I was unable to cross this line, that Ted had to deal with the fallout from his deeds without my protection. The talk was quite difficult. The desperation and sadness in my mother's words were audible to me, but there was a glimmer of comprehension below it. The choice to not save Ted's life could have had unintended consequences. Surprisingly, the response I anticipated never materialized. My family could have anticipated my rejection. Or maybe they were too preoccupied with the crisis to have the energy to engage in another conflict. For whatever reason, the storm I had expected never materialized, and in its place, a kind of tense calm descended upon us all within the next weeks. I started thinking back on everything that had happened. After coming to such a firm conclusion, there was an odd feeling of finality. I came to see that sometimes the decisions that offer us the most peace are also the most difficult. I had reiterated my commitment to a better, more self-respecting lifestyle by saying no, in addition to strengthening my boundaries. The rhythm of life has gradually returned. I've been becoming more involved in my interests and pastimes, getting back in touch with old acquaintances, and overall attempting to re-establish and strengthen the life I want to lead. One that isn't dominated by family strife all the time. I still have a tenuous connection with my parents, but I now respect my limits. This approach has also taught me a lot about forgiveness, maybe because I've come to the fact that I'm serious about keeping them. The sort that acknowledges people's imperfections while simultaneously acknowledging that they don't have to control how I live my life, nor the kind that justifies destructive conduct. In order to release myself from the disappointment and rage that were burdening me, I have forgiven Ted, not for his sake, but for mine. Regarding this community, your assistance has been a lighthouse for me in some very trying moments. More than you can imagine, every communication, bit of guidance, and shared experience has been helpful. You have reminded me that we are never really alone, even in our most isolated moments. I thus want to sincerely thank you as I finish this update and, hopefully, this chapter of my life. Undoubtedly, I will face more obstacles in life, but I feel more prepared to face them now, more conscious of my beliefs and strengths, and more determined than ever to live a life that embodies them. I appreciate everyone's participation in my trip. Cheers to progress, education, and development. Anything is thrown at us.